Greetings and welcome back to Disney Journey. I'm retired Imagineer Jim Schull, and on this episode I'm going to be talking about something that just came through the news pipe, which is the announcement that OLC, which is the Oriental Land Company, owners and operators of Tokyo Disneyland Resort, they've announced they're going to be doing a major expansion of those parks, both of them. And that's the topic we'll be talking about starting now.
There was a time the Walt Disney Company issued annual reports. I know, I have a closet full of them. And I would gather them because I'd go down to Burbank every year and pick up my bound copy. OLC, which is the owner and operator of Tokyo Disneyland Resort, continues that tradition. And they recently issued their annual report. And in it, it talks about their success and their future. Now, backing up the truck, as an Imagineer, I was able to go to Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo DisneySea many times. And I stayed in the parks, I walked through the parks, I worked in the parks, and I stayed in the hotels. I went to the entertainment, and I was always amazed by the park and how it evolved. It became kind of the best of any of the Disney parks. OLC respects the Disney legacy, and they're not afraid to preserve it, but they're also not afraid to do new stuff. There's been quite a bit that's been announced, like Wreck-It Ralph, or the brand new Space Mountain that's coming to Tomorrowland. Now this will be unique because it's kind of a fall back to the original John Hens version. But it also, by building it, frees up a lot of space in Tomorrowland. This construction is well underway, and it will be open in the not too distant future. It's a good example of how you continue to have to nurture a park. It's a high capital investment that's ongoing. You can't stop building, ever.
Tokyo Disneyland was the first Disney park to be built on reclaimed seafloor. Hong Kong Disneyland was far in the future. To build Tokyo Disneyland, once they dredged out the seafloor of Tokyo Bay, they had to put piles, which are long concrete piers reinforced with steel, deep into the soil in order to have a foundation that they could build the new rides and facilities on. It took a long time, and it made a lot of design changes and forced upon the designers, such as Pirates of the Caribbean, which doesn't have two drops like it does in Florida or Anaheim. It only has one drop because, remember, you're very close to what was the sea level. So that kind of forced some decisions upon the designers. Doesn't make anything bad, it just makes it different.
Among the differences is that most people arrive by train, so they take this bridge. Another was the original Space Mountain was sponsored by Coca-Cola.
When it was built, Tokyo Disneyland contained a lot of vacant land. I remember one time after a meeting, I walked across the vacant land just behind the Speedway. Hard to believe now that this land would be the future home of Mickey's Toontown, the Beauty and the Beast ride, an expansion of New Fantasyland with a theater. But back then, that reclaimed seafloor was vegetation and dirt. True story.
Equally true is that Haunted Mansion's in Fantasyland, and that Star Tours has an extra queue scene.
I co-host with Jim Hill and Len Testa Disney Unpacked, which is a monthly video show that drops on Patreon. I'll leave a link in the show notes here. But when we do Disney Unpacked, there's just not enough time to hit every story, and some of the stories probably aren't appropriate. I mean, Jim Hill, when I told him this story I'm about to share with you, called it, "It's a Shaggy Dog story, Schull," but nevertheless, here it is. My first trip to Tokyo Disneyland came about really suddenly. I got a call in my office asking, well, what were my plans for the weekend? And I told them, and they said, well, make other plans and pack your bag. So therefore, in about 24 hours, I found myself on a plane heading to Tokyo for my very first visit. And it was great. It was a wonderful time. But it was a very different time. There wasn't on-demand video. No, that's too easy. There was a television set hung from the ceiling. And that's where I was introduced to Julia Roberts, because she was in Mystic Pizza, and that was the movie I'd get to see as I crossed the Pacific. When I landed in Tokyo, I was accompanied by someone from Disneyland in Anaheim who had been there before and helped them in a lot of different ways. Well, he was kind of hungry. So he said, Show, you need to come with me because we're going to go get a pork chop. I was tired. I mean, I've been traveling now for 20 hours. So sure, why not? Well, I didn't know what I was getting myself into because when we piled out of the taxi there in Tokyo, I walked into a restaurant. Well, it's not any restaurant. It was a tall, thin building, and we climbed upstairs, multiple stairs, to get to the floor where there was the restaurant. But it wasn't any restaurant because in a room the size of a living room, there were not one but three restaurants. And going behind the curtain of restaurant number 3, I had my pork chop. And admittedly, it was a wonderful pork chop. Best pork chop I think I ever had eaten. Although at that point in time, I probably would have been, thumbs up if I had 2 pieces of warm cardboard. Anyway, got back in the taxi, went to the train station, took the train over to the Tokyo Disneyland Resort, thinking, well, I'll just get a taxi and head for my hotel. Oh no, at 2 a.m. Tokyo time, the taxi cab drivers are all in their beds. And so I hiked across a cold, wet, dark, flat parking lot, which was a parking lot for Tokyo Disneyland as I headed to my hotel, which was the Hilton, which is how I found you pronounced Hilton in the United States in Tokyo. I was stopped once by a survey by a security person asking me, what are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you, as an American, out at night, this hour especially? I flashed my WDI card and they said, oh, well, you're an American, you're excused. The Hilton is that way. So I hiked across the parking lot, went to the front gate, got buzzed in, went to the front door, got buzzed in, went to the lobby, was handed my key, went upstairs, went to my room, opened the door, fell in my bed, and prepared myself for the very next morning when all of my work meetings were about to begin. That's my Shaggy Dog story of my first trip to Tokyo Disneyland. True story.
Starting new projects is like pulling a block out of a Jenga tower. You really don't intend it, but there is a set of unforeseen circumstances that start to develop.
Adventureland, when it opened in Tokyo Disneyland, did not look the same as it does today. For example, it had no treehouse. It did have a front door with a marquee, but they put the treehouse in later on to be an iconic thing there on the hub. And the treehouse is gorgeous, although you can't get there today. I did. I spent a lot of time up in the treehouse, which was still really telling the story of Swiss Family Robinson, which at the time I appreciated, but I always thought, gee, I wonder how many local tourists or locals understand or ever read that story. But it's a beautiful treehouse, and when you climbed to the top, you could see great vistas and views because it was located right there on the hub. You could even see outside of the park to the hotels outside the park berm. Today, that treehouse, unfortunately, is closed.
The Enchanted Tiki Room is a good example of this being kind of a kit of parts. Anything that has the name Adventure in it fits. So when we look at the new Adventureland rendering, you see a collection of, well, attractions that are all about adventure. Even the new attractions that are coming.
Also added to Adventureland was a Caribbean Plaza. Now this was a later add, and it had dining and retail, and it also offered an opportunity for there to be an expression of an exotic locale, which was the Caribbean. Now, it really didn't fit with anything else around it, but it didn't matter because this was Adventureland, and the story was all about adventure. That was the bucket into which all the rides and attractions were poured. For example, the old Tiki Room now became Stitch at a later date.
Looking at Adventureland from above, you can really appreciate how much of the land the Jungle Cruise takes up. That version of the ride is essentially the same as the one in the Magic Kingdom in Florida, but it's very tight and it takes up so much of Adventureland. And when that land opened, effectively it was the same as the other parks, but that changed.
Adventureland continued to be different from any other version, and you realize that as soon as you get to the station to board the train which is the Western River Railroad. Now, Tokyo Disneyland does not have a train that circles the park, but it does have a train. It has one stop and one stop only, and it's there in Adventureland. The first part of the train it's interesting, but kind of boring because you're in a tunnel of trees because it circles, or nearly circles, the Jungle Cruise. It does break out into Westernland, not Frontierland, and you have grand views of the island, Splash Mountain, and Big Thunder. At the very end of the ride, you go through the primeval world with dinosaurs for some reason. We do not know if the entire train will be shut down, but all the renderings of the new Adventureland indicate that we will be losing the portion of the train that goes through Adventureland.
As I said, Jungle Cruise is the same in Tokyo as it is in Florida. And there's no real good way to cut it or trim it. And even if you did, that doesn't buy you very much. No, the best thing to do is close it, which is the tact that OLC is taking. The concept rendering is an intention. It's not a design. So often in Disney, they intend or tip their hand on what they want to do. Maybe we'll get an Android spin ride finally. We'll just have to wait and see. While we're on the topic of concept art, here's an original piece for Tokyo DisneySea. That park, as shared, is not the park that opened.
Tokyo DisneySea was the second park that opened in Tokyo Disneyland Resort. And when it opened, it was really designed and geared toward more adults. It was a kind of a date park, I've heard it said. However, it evolved over time because the reality is a Disney fan is a Disney fan. And that expressed itself in many different ways. For example, the Sinbad journey. When it opened, it featured this adult character Sinbad with his tiger. But when it reopened after TDL got all the guest comments, they realized they really need to substitute. And now today you have the, young adult version of Sinbad, a child's version. And the tiger is not an adult, it's a child's version of a tiger. And he has a cute little turban on his head. And there's a wonderful Alan Menken score that keeps the movie theme moving forward. Even though, of course, it wasn't a movie, should be, but it wasn't. And there were other examples where in Tokyo DisneySea, there was a shift from the adult to the more friendly Disney side.
A part of making Tokyo DisneySea more family friendly, more Disney traditional, was going into Tokyo DisneySea, some of the attractions, and altering them. Port Discovery is a big land, but half of it is really kind of unused. The New England area is a beautiful location, but there are no rides. You enter Port Discovery, either by taking the walking loop around the edge of the park or cutting through the volcano directly along this pathway that takes you directly to Port Discovery. Honestly, if you haven't, go take this walk because it's one of the biggest, best, long examples of great classic Disney design ever. And I won't take an argument over that. It transitions from steel to rock work to seascape rock. You can't get better than this. However you get there, though, once you arrive, whether by boat or L train or by walking, you realize that Port Discovery has one ride and a transportation system, which are great. It does have a piece of land directly across the waterway, which is land for the future. The L train that connects the American waterfront to Port Discovery is a well worth a ride. And it gives you some great views of Aquatopia, which was the second trackless ride vehicle ride to be opened there at the Tokyo Disneyland Resort. It's kind of simple. There's no intellectual property. There's no character development or presence. And it's kind of obvious when you think about it that you're just driving on wheels across a thin skim of water. As I said, it's a lot of fun. There are some near misses, both of vehicles and waterfalls. You circle around a whirlpool. You go through a tunnel. It's a lot of fun. It's not great, but it's a lot of fun, and it's definitely unique. I remember walking around it several times, both when it was open and closed. And it's a brilliant use of technology because it is directed by beacons that are hidden in rockwork and on architectural ornamentation and light poles. The water itself is pretty clear. There is a painted bottom that gives you the illusion that the sea is much deeper than it really is. The whirlpool is totally convincing, and watching out for the spray is a lot of fun too. As I said, the ride is directed by these beacons, which are all over the place. Unlike Winnie the Pooh, where the beacons are in the floor. Here in Aquatopia, they're in architecture or rockwork. But they serve the same purpose. They direct the vehicles, keep them from crashing each other. When the vehicles are time to go to bed, their barn is here through a set of roll-up doors. Oh, and I said earlier, the New England Village, we should talk about that because as nice as it is, it's a shop, it's a restaurant, and a beautiful, relaxing environment. But TDS has plans.
Looking again at the rendering, what catches my eye is not just that the Aquatopia ride is gone, along with the New England Village, but now there's a show building there. Now, the show building very well could be a Duffy ride, or at least a Duffy theater, and a character greeting area that's all weather as opposed to what they have now, a shop, a dining opportunity, all combining to make a Duffy mini-land. And that makes perfect sense, given the success of Duffy at Tokyo Disneyland Resort in general, and especially his presence there at TDS.
Disney the Duffy Bear was designed and made its premiere in the United States, but it really took root in Asia, especially in Japan, because everything is all Duffy. I've stood in the park and watched people in 3 and 4 hour lines when something new Duffy was being released. And people, they love their Duffy. You can easily see people walking through the park with their Duffys to pose them, to take them to show them things. And it doesn't matter what age or what location or where they put them. Sometimes I see strollers, no children, just Duffys. Eating Duffy is a little weird, but there it goes. Duffy is the Disney bear, but he's also the star of Tokyo DisneySea. So that is why I think where you currently meet Duffy was in a little carved out area in a building that was never intended for Duffy. Well, they may abandon that, and they may take that part of Port Discovery to make it Duffy Land.
You know, it's always true that you look at a piece of artwork and there are always lines on paper. They indicate an idea, a direction, but it doesn't indicate a plan. Certainly what we call tender dries are nowhere near their time to be released. However, it does show that Orin Land Company, OLC, continues to invest in the Tokyo Disneyland Resort. And that's a good thing for all of us as fans, as a business, in general. Hopefully, what we'll see will be worthy of the effort that they're going to be undertaking in this plan that they've announced will be finally realized in the year 2030.
I don't know much as an Imagineer, but I learned that you really cannot plan based on a piece of concept art. It's an indication, it's a signpost, it's a direction. All we do know for sure is that good stuff is coming to Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo DisneySea, courtesy of OLC.
That does it for this episode. Please join me next week for another Disney journey. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like, hit the bell notification button, and send me your comments because I do read every one. Till then, it's goodbye from Lost Canyon.